Hi.
Hi.
Elohim, thanks so much for meeting with me.
Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me.
I kind of want to start out just by talking about your upcoming tour called Group Therapy.
Yes.
I find it fascinating. I wondered what made you decide to call it Group Therapy and then what your experiences are with Group Therapy.
So the reason I called it Group Therapy was because the connection and the community that's kind of come from the music and the shows. So many people have met each other through the music and going to my shows. So it felt like a way for us to all officially come together. It's my tour, my headlining tour, first time ever. So I wanted it to be for us, not for me, for us. And so it felt like the best way to do that. The name came to me and I was like, oh my gosh, that's perfect for the tour. So that was why. And I actually don't have any experience with group therapy. It sounds really interesting and cool, and so it feels like something, I don't know, we can make it kind of feel like that in a way and just continue to help sort of break that stigma and put it into people's lives.
Well, what I find fascinating about it is that you don't have your own experience with group therapy specifically, but you've kind of accidentally made your own group therapy with your fans.
That's so true, yes.
So in a sense, I mean, I've had it where I've gone to like Al-Anon meetings or like codependency meetings.
Wow.
And I've had friends that have gone to different types of like group therapy, whether it's like for PTSD or what have you. And I think what I myself was apprehensive about, and I think they were apprehensive about, is that it's pretty vulnerable to go into a space where you're going to say probably stuff you don't even say to your closest friends and family. And then while you have the innate understanding that most people have experienced what you've experienced, you always think, well, they won't understand or I'm going to be judged.
Right.
And I think what you've kind of accidentally stumbled on is that through your music and your way of being vulnerable, you've connected people and made your own group therapy. Would you say via, like, is this like people commenting on pictures or music videos? Like, how would you say that you've cultivated this group connection?
I think it's through everything, really. Initially, it started with the social media. That's kind of the easiest way for that direct contact. And I've been really active on social media and make sure to open my messages. I'll take, a couple hours a day and go through messages. I'll respond to people's comments. And that always is really exciting to the listener. But yeah, so I think it was from social media, and then also really cool. It really came from going to the shows and people meeting up at the shows. People have said to me, I met my best friend because of you through going to your show. So yeah, a lot of it was also through that real life community, and people will fly to LA and all meet up. So it's through the shows and the internet. It's kind of the amazing thing about the internet is being able to build that community and those friendships.
Absolutely. I think it starts, like you said, like with that simple connection of I like this woman's music and you like the music. But I can imagine that people see somebody comment something saying like, hey, I relate to this song for X number of reasons. They read that comment and they're like, well, I relate to her and you. And then next thing you know, you build this dialogue of people being able to communicate on a level that they might not be able to openly do kind of in the real world.
It's so true. And I actually it was sort of like group therapy. I did a live stream of me doing a therapy session and then offered people could text in questions for the therapist, and this was all live on a live stream. So the therapist kind of talked to me, asked me questions, and it was so cool to see people's response to that, because it was like, wow, I'm too afraid to talk about that, but seeing you talk about it, makes me feel better. When I think about it, I'm like, I wish that I saw other people talking about this, because I feel so crazy and inside my head when I'm going through this stuff.
Well, what's fascinating about you, I didn't realize that you did that by having people have an inside look at one of your therapy sessions and how it might go down. How many people have we both met that don't go to therapy because of the negative connotations or misconstruing what it actually is, or how a session would go down? Not to say that your therapy session is like all the other ones, because there are a variety of tactics and ways of going about it, but just the fact that you are open enough to bring people in and let them know that it's not scary, nobody's bullying you.
Exactly.
It's a dialogue. It's not always just you know, kind of dumping all your feelings and then writing in a notebook, not looking at you.
That's why I wanted to do it. And so many people were commenting saying, wow, I had no idea therapy could be like this. It always sounded so scary to me. And so to be able to sort of like peel back the curtains and be like, this is what it looks like. Of course, it is challenging, therapy, but it's also so rewarding. I mean, it changed my life for sure. So just being able to show that to a community of people is so amazing. And that's why the internet is amazing for building that kind of community.
So how would you say therapy did change your life? What made you start doing it? And what would you say your fears were going in initially?
So I started therapy because I was having these severe episodes of panic and anxiety. That was what I've struggled with since I was probably 7. And I remember the first one, and my life ever since that first panic attack, my life completely changed. It was like I couldn't be away from my mom. She would walk into another aisle at a store, and I would just go into full panic. And I think at the time, I was 7. I didn't know what that was. And I think my parents were they couldn't really relate because they didn't know that feeling. So they didn't know what was going on. So then once I was in my adult life, and it started coming back really heavily, I would have days where I couldn't leave the house without going through these severe fits of, vomiting and lying on the floor in the bathroom, and just, it's horrible. People in my life have seen me go through it, and they're like, I had no idea that anybody went through stuff like this. So I was going through these fits, and I had a manager at the time she sat me down, she called me, and she was like, I really think that you should start seeing a therapist. And I was like, okay, I don't know. Even me, I'm like, I'm fine, I'll be fine.
You're like vomiting in a trash can. You're like, it's fine. It's all fine. I just need another trash can.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it kept happening. And then a friend of mine introduced me to his therapist, actually. He was like, just, here's the number. It's up to you. She changed my life, hopefully it will help you. So I went, and the first session I was sobbing, and then I left just like, oh my gosh, this woman's gonna change my life. I think also, I was really lucky to have been sort of told about this particular woman.
And to have a positive first session, because how many people it almost feels like dating, where you're constantly looking for that click of somebody that you're able to open up to, but also is able to push you in the right amount of ways.
And it can be discouraging if you were to go to one and you're just like, gosh, this is so expensive, and I don't know, it didn't really do much for me. I was really lucky, and the first session with her, oh my gosh, I was sobbing. It was like meeting a perfect match or something, and I could feel like, okay, this is going to help me a lot.
Sorry to interrupt, but would you say the reason that you felt that connection is because just initially being able to tell somebody your side of the story and not feel like there was something wrong with you, or was she able to identify what was wrong? Like, what was it about that first session that made you feel like this was going to be important for your future health?
I think for whatever reason, sitting in the room with her, I felt a safety with her, and I felt comfortable enough to tell her things that I had never said out loud. And I think that was that feeling of relief, fear, but sort of the relief taking away a bit of the fear. You know, you like say something, you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's literally like a weight being taken off of you because you've been carrying it around
for years.
Yeah.
And that's, as a human being, I don't think we're equipped to just be holding these things inside. So I think that was just right off the bat feeling really safe. There was just this connection and she had like a nurturing quality to her. So I think it was that, just of feeling safe and being able to say things that had never come out of my mouth before, but had been inside of me.
Absolutely. What I find fascinating is that I think we consider these places safe spaces, but nobody knows how to define that because everybody's safe space is differently.
Yeah.
So it might be somebody being able to make eye contact. It might be somebody hearing your pain and not flinching or like not turning away or being able to share their pain or have examples or sometimes just a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Like I think I spent a lot of my life not understanding what was going on with me, and it took a while into my therapy, not only for my therapist to say what she thought was kind of going on with me, but for me to also accept it.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time she told me, she's like, I think you have anxiety. And I was just like, no. You know what I mean?
Fine.
I was just like, as a non-doctor, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I'm okay.
And same, like, I remember she told me I had OCD, and I had a friend that had severe OCD, and I was like, no, it doesn't look anything like my friend's OCD, so I don't have OCD, not understanding that it comes out of other people in different ways, that it expresses in different ways, and that
it manifests in totally different ways. Like for me, it ends up coming out of me, and I actually vomit. And it's crazy because I've actually met so many people that happens to, and I never in my life knew anybody that ever happened to. It's crazy.
So you go to your first therapy session.
Yes.
It clicks for you. You continue to go. When did you decide that taking medication was also important for you? That it wasn't just being able to express the pain that you were going through, but that you needed more help?
Yes. So I had been seeing my therapist for about a year. I went on the road. I was really unhealthy. I was 35 pounds lighter than I am now. I could barely eat from my anxiety. Words and speaking with a therapist wasn't enough for me, even though that was the goal. That was the initial goal. Hi, help me. I don't want to have to take any medication. Let's talk about this, and what can I do?
Yeah.
So I started touring a bunch, and I think my anxiety and panic just manifested into actual sickness, physical. Like I would get sick all the time. I couldn't go do a one-off show for a weekend without getting some sort of cold or ear infection. And I think it was just that like stress and panic and anxiety. So the final thing was I was on the road. It was the second night of a 2-month tour. I got severe pneumonia, and I went to urgent care, and she was like, you cannot do the rest of this tour, and you can't fly even for a few days because you are so sick. Thank goodness that you came in today. It would have gotten so much worse, and you would have ended up in the hospital. So I was in bed for 2 months, and after
that date?
Yeah, so instead of being on tour for 2 months,
you were in bed
I was in bed for 2 months.
Wow.
So I was ready to fly home, I think like 3 days later. I was on the East Coast, came home, was in bed for 2 months, saw a doctor out here. They were like, you can't do any physical activity, not even like go for a walk for at least 6 weeks. And then it was like this whole crazy recovery thing. After that, that was my breaking point, and I was like, I think I need extra help. So I went and I saw the therapist. She said, I think you should go see the psychiatrist. So I went to him, and he prescribed me Lexapro, which is an antidepressant, but it's prescribed for anxiety. And I was beyond terrified to start. It's like you fill your prescription, and you're just like looking at it like, No.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Not me. No. And I grew up in a house that was very, like, hippie-ish kind of parents, and, we barely took...
Tea can fix this.
Yeah, exactly. Echinacea tea, and you're fine.
Yeah. Have you tried a bath?
Yeah, exactly. So that was my childhood. When we would get sick, it was like, no NyQuil, nothing. So I didn't tell my family. I was so scared. And I ended up starting the medication. The first 2 weeks were hell, horrible. And luckily, I had sort of started opening up to friends in my small community here, like at the studio. And a couple of people were like, I used to be on that, or I am on that. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea. Is this normal to be feeling this way? And so honestly, it was so bad that I was like, I have to reach out to people. And it's so crazy how I remember my agent, a couple different people that are really close to me had actually been on that medication, and I had no idea. So it was interesting, and everyone was like, just tough, like, as if you can, just tough out these first 2 weeks. And once I got through that first 2 weeks, which were, oh my gosh, probably the worst.
What were some of the side effects that you were experiencing from going on? It was Lexapro, correct?
Yes. So it didn't help that I was very nervous to start taking it.
Yeah,
so,
which is the reason you were taking it.
Exactly. It's
You're like,
funny how
everything
life
I do
works.
makes me nervous.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this even though it's making me nervous. So I remember getting the sort of, I think they say it's called like brain shocks. And it's these really crazy shooting pains in your head.
Oh, wow.
I sort of would tell myself, like, it's okay. It's as if your brain is sort of
like rewiring.
Yeah. So of course it's gonna take some stuff out of you.
Yeah.
I couldn't really sleep. I was so nervous that I had started it, and I hadn't told my parents, and that was so weird to me. So I was kind of up at night, like, I can't believe this thing is in my body. Like, what is it doing? And I was sort of obsessing over what this tiny pill is actually doing. And then it was just like severe panics. They actually say to keep a little bit of like anti-anxiety, a stronger anti-anxiety with you in case. So yeah, it was, I remember being here at the studio because I was in the middle of doing stuff and I couldn't really take the time off. Now whenever somebody asks me about it, I'm like, if you're going to start, make sure you can have at least like a few days to feel adjusted. And I remember somebody was talking to me here, and I was just like, I'm so sorry. Like, I need you to leave this room right now. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
And actually, someone I work with a lot here, he was like, he's like, I was worried that, he said he was very worried about me because he didn't know if it was going to get better. And then 2 weeks later, it's so funny, people really close to me started to notice the changes, which was really cool actually, and I personally felt this change. So yeah, after the 2 weeks, it was like life-changing, truly.
So what would you say some of the positive changes you started to feel after the 2 weeks that you had to kind of overcome?
The initial first positive thing was waking up and feeling the feeling of, I want to get out of bed and I want to do stuff. Whereas before, I'd wake up and feel, I want to lay in bed all day. I don't want to get up. I don't just watch TV, do anything but get out of this bed. So it was the second I would wake up, I would feel inspired and excited to be living, which was so awesome. And so that was the initial feeling of like, wow, this is
Had you ever
amazing.
felt that? Or had it been so long since you felt that?
So long.
Yeah.
Or like, you'll have a glimpse, maybe like one day you'll wake up, but honestly, I hadn't felt that in a very long time. So it was definitely noticeable. It wasn't like, oh, this is cool. It was like, wow, this is really different. I feel so good. Because I could remember feeling that at some point. So it was almost like, I always say it's like the medication brought back the best version of me.
Yeah.
That maybe I hadn't seen in, years.
And then stabilized it, because it's one thing
Exactly.
to be like, oh, I remember feeling that way one day in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah, exactly. And so it's like, you know, maybe if you had a glimpse, but it's like this was every day I was waking up feeling, so, you know, I would get up, go to the gym, and actually feel inspired to be living. That was the greatest thing. And then sort of taking off the edge of that anxiety for everyday things, it was just easier to get up and be able to go to the store or drive to the studio or get on an airplane. Yeah. I had a lot of trouble with flying and being sort of like trapped in situations. And I remember I was sitting next to someone who I work with on the plane, and I was always the one freaking out if there was any turbulence. And I had times where I would get tears in my eyes crying, crying while flying. And when we finally landed, it was a super turbulent flight flying to Atlanta, I think. So turbulent they couldn't even do the drink service. And I'm just sitting there watching a movie. He's kind of looking at me like, how is she not freaking out right now? And this was the first flight after I had, like, settled into the medication. And we landed, and he was like, you weren't freaking out at all. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. And just, it was almost like it brought me back to that place of, like, it's all good. What's going to happen is going to happen, and I can't control that, even though I really want to control everything that's about to happen in my life. One of the big reasons why my therapist thought it was important for me to try medication was because my mind would just go to those dark places, and I was so afraid of leaving the house or someone I love leaving the house. Every time I would go through this whole movie in my head of these terrible things happening. And she was like, listen, that's normal. Everybody has that feeling when a loved one, you know, goes on a trip or something. It's like, of course, be safe. I love you so much. But she's like, I have that when my daughter leaves. But it doesn't take over and consume my entire day and my entire life. And
You're not
that's
debilitated from this one thought.
Exactly. And obsessing over that thought and just going to the most dark place. And so she was like, that's where, you know, kind of you differ, and why I think you could really benefit from taking medication. And, you know, I fought her on it because I'm like, no, like, I can't. No, not me. No, that's crazy. But it's not. And she was like, why would, there's this medication, and it can help you live your one life better. Why would you not take it? She's like, it's like it could help you not suffer every day, and that's what it did, which is, so I'm eternally grateful for her because she changed my life.
You talked about having your first panic attack when you were 7. Nobody really understood what it was. You continue to have them. When did you label it a panic attack? When did you start understanding what it was to the point where you could tell people, this is what's happening to me right now, and this is what I need from you? Like you said, kicking people out of a studio or telling people you need space. When were you able to identify it, understand all the, like, I don't know if I started throwing up, I would immediately go, this is a panic attack, because that's not how I experienced my panic attacks.
I think I identified it as a panic attack probably when I was 17, 18, but I still think it was sort of this weird idea that I didn't even know what a panic attack was, even though I was fully going through one. It wasn't until my 20s that I was like, oh, this is, and seeing a therapist, and I'm saying, you have severe anxiety, and you have severe panic disorder, and you go through dissociation, and it's like, it's that same thing where you're just like, no, not me. I have a line in a song that's like, it's talking about how you think you're fine and you're watching other people and they seem crazy to you, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's also happening to me. So it's a weird, that can be scary too, sort of that first step of admitting it almost. And accepting it in a way.
I read in an interview that you had this panic attack in front of your manager. He had never really experienced anything. He'd never seen it before. And going forth, you actually gave him a new understanding of what this meant. How does he, seeing that, how does he help you? Like, what are some of the things that he does that he now knows from experiencing it before, or things you've told him? How does he help you along?
So my tour manager, after having seen me go through probably what was one of my worst episodes, it was on the road, he got in a, once I came out of it, when I'm in the middle of it, it's like I can't even talk. It's not me. It's very strange. So once I was out of it, on the other side, I always say, we spoke about it. He was like, it's so crazy. It really is like you are a different person. And he's like, I've never seen anything like that, nor did I know that people went through that. And I think, honestly, for me, it's not that he can sort of like physically do anything to help me, but just having that understanding, it's like, okay, this is real. Just that alone is so helpful. There's
to be seen.
Exactly. And to be heard, and to have people around you that know this is not her being dramatic or being dramatic. Which I hear people say that a lot, that people say that, or their families will say that, you're being dramatic.
Yeah.
So just having people that understand that's like, okay. So I came up with this thing that was before show, because I sort of tried to figure out what was triggering for me. And one thing was, if I'm getting ready for a show, being around people was very triggering. So I came up with this thing. I'm going invisible right now. Nice. So that I'm in the room, even if I'm in the room with you, I'm fine. If I'm dry heaving in a bag, please don't freak out. Yeah. I'm not an alien. I'm fine, and I'm gonna come out on the other side. I don't need you to help me.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, like if you're like, bring me water, that's awesome. But so I came up with this thing with my team, my touring team, that's like, I'm going invisible, and just that, and just knowing that people know, and
it's not personal.
Exactly.
I'm getting into my head or into my space. I'm about to perform. Just like somebody's like, hey, I'm going to go on a call. Nobody'd be talking to you at the same time.
Exactly. And I think one of the things with mental health is that the fear of judgment from other people, and the fear of, it's like, I'm already having and experiencing panic and anxiety right now. And to add on top of that, I have to be around people and worry that they're going to be like, what's wrong with her? Or like, are you okay? And I don't know, or just almost like overreact to the situation where it's like, I am okay. This is maybe just a process that my body has to go through sometimes.
It'd be like if every time you got pregnant, somebody freaked out. They're like, what's happening to your stomach right now?
Exactly.
So I think you created some normalcy and when it does happen, and some preventative measures of...
Totally. As to not get triggered, yeah.
Yeah. People have like a checklist of, I'm going through something, this is how I'm going to either cope with it or get out of it. I love that you have almost a check sheet of how to prevent it, especially because people look at artists or performers or people that are around other people and think, well, you're doing this because you don't have fear, or you're doing this because this is where you feel the most comfortable. Exactly. When a lot of times you're doing it through the fear, because I'm a stand-up comic. I love making people laugh. I love connecting with people, but I also have deep social anxiety. I have issues with being touched. I have issues with being bombarded with too much information. I wouldn't even say claustrophobic, but I get easily overwhelmed, and that's a trigger for me.
Overstimulation.
Yes, and you start to have a panic. And the fact that you took the time not only to understand what some of your triggers, you can't always find all of them, and life is, especially when you're on the road.
Life has a way of throwing things at you.
Yeah,
yes.
And you can be in a country or have a new experience in your career that you couldn't have predicted.
Exactly.
And you have to be able to not only be okay with this as being a new trigger, but then almost, now you're at the third step of your checklist where you're just like, we're past going invisible. We need everybody to leave me alone or what have you. The fact that you kind of made a checklist of how to limit the amount of ones that happen on a daily basis, or especially when you're traveling, but then also teach people how to take care of you. And in teaching people how to take care of you, they might be able to take care of someone that's having a panic attack on the subway, or being around a family member that's going through something that might not be a panic attack, but it might be them feeling overwhelmed. And just asking those simple questions. Do you want a friend right now, or do you want to be alone?
That is the perfect thing. That's the perfect thing to say.
Yeah.
Do you want a friend right now, or do you want to be alone? I want to be alone.
Yeah.
And you saying, got it.
And I'm not taking it personally. I'm not going to feel rejected. You're not going to get an email later that says, like, you pushed me away and I don't feel seen. Would you say that it started with your tour schedule of teaching the people that work with you or work for you how to take care of you, and that was a way that you taught friends? Or would you say it was friends and then you taught tour? Like, how do you feel like you came up with that process?
I feel like it definitely came from the touring family, because those were the people I was around all the time. It's like you wake up and you're with them all day and into the night, and you do that all over again. So I think it definitely came from the touring side of things first. And then it's been really cool because I've noticed people in my life, just like I encourage, I've made these videos talking about mental health or these songs, and I encourage the listener, if they're going through that, it's like, if your parents don't understand what you're going through, have them listen to this song, or like watch me talk about it, and it might bring this new thing to them. So I've noticed that people in my life who have struggled didn't know that I struggled, and just from hearing my music or watching an interview or reading something, they've actually come to me and reached out for help, and that's been amazing. It's like I didn't need to call everyone and be like, this is what I'm doing now. By them watching those, and that's why I do this. Literally, this is why I'm here. I want to help people. And so it's wild. I was just texting with my friend in San Francisco yesterday because he reached out to me. We didn't even have each other's numbers, but kind of friend of a friend, and his panic and anxiety's gotten so bad he wanted to go on medication, and through my music and reading about what I'm doing, he knew that I had started, and so he reached out to me. I was like, please, here's my number, call me, text me, I'm here for you. It's a process. So yeah, it's cool. People in my life just started to see it through the music I'm putting out, which is ideal to me because, like you said, it is interesting. You look at people doing music, traveling, being on stage, being a comedian, and you're like, oh, they're fearless. They have no fear. And I always saw that. It's like, especially with Instagram and everybody looking beautiful and traveling the world, I would see that and I'm like, how are they doing that without freaking out all the time? Like me, I'm like, I could never do that. And it almost shut me down in a way. So that's a big reason for me why opening that veil and showing that side, and people being able to hear my story through the music and or through an interview, that's amazing to me because, like you, I experience social anxiety. If you watched my show, you would never know that, because when I am on stage, it's the best me that I can possibly be. And I think that's why I go through sort of these fits getting to there, because it's very scary. But once I get there, I learned to let go, and I realized the reason why I was so anxious leading up to a show. And then I would get on stage, I'd be fine. And I'd be so happy and performing, and this was my time to let go and let everything out. I realized it's because I'm alone on stage and I don't have to talk to anybody. I get to go into my world and like just share music and art with people. So it's interesting that you said that about doing stand-up comedy, where someone would look at you and be like, oh, she's fearless.
There's also an undisclosed dialogue. So for me, it's I tell jokes, you laugh.
Yeah.
We call anybody that talks back a heckler. Mm-hmm. Literally, there's a negative
I've had hecklers.
Yeah. So you have anybody that interrupts or talks back or yells out or is disturbing in any fashion. Yeah. They're the enemy of this dialogue, because it really is I tell something, you laugh or you don't laugh. Those are or you clap. Those are your choices. With you, there is I have my musicians on stage. I have my planned songs I'm going to do. Yes, you might be kind of free flowing with what you might say in between, or maybe the order that you choose. But it's a dialogue. Nobody's supposed to rush the stage. Nobody's supposed to throw anything at you. Nobody's asking questions. There is I think we fear what could go wrong. The lights might not work,
That's
or my
probably
microphone.
my biggest
Yeah,
thing.
and I just shot a special a month ago, and I could not sleep because I was like, what if a camera fails? Not my job. Liz, it's not your job.
Yeah.
Why? When did you go to film school and start to learn
It reminds me of me because I drive my whole team nuts because I'm like, but what if this one wire inside this one mic? They're like, that's not your job.
Yeah. And I would find myself being overwhelmed by something that isn't truly my problem, and there's somebody else that's going to problem solve that. But once I get on stage, I'm the same way. I lock into, I've done this before.
Yeah.
I have experience. I have negative experience of things going wrong,
yes.
but I also have, over the years, so many positive experiences. Even when things do go wrong, I have positive experiences of how I handled the things that have gone wrong.
Totally.
And I think that's what you start to teach people, is that whether they're a performer or not, everything that you do is going to have a level of fear, because you're meeting a new person, you're going to a job interview, you're going to a friend's house where you don't really know many people there. There's all these experiences where it seems like it's an unknown, but truthfully, you've gone to school, you've gone to tons of things where you've met new people, and you've interviewed for somebody before, or you've had a conversation where you weren't sure what the questions were going to be, and you have to start to learn to self-soothe and guide yourself through the panic in some way, because I think everybody, whether they have panic attacks or not, have experienced that level of, I can't do this, or something's going to go wrong and I'm going to look stupid.
Yeah.
Would you say that you've learned to be a better friend through the kind of group therapy that you've created with your fans, and via social media and through your shows? Like, do you think that's been its own teacher for you?
Beyond.
Yeah.
The listeners are always like, you've saved me, and I'm like, you have saved me. I never knew anybody that went through what I go through, and so it's opened my eyes so much, and people who even suffer more than I do. It's opened my eyes in such an amazing way. It's this like newfound love for every human. I think because I've gone through the most probably mental health struggles in the last few years that I've ever gone through, and so that too sort of just opened me up to, wow, so many people are struggling. And I don't know, I found this just newfound love for everyone. So yes, it's been this whole experience has been the craziest learning experience of my entire life.
The average person has 5 to 10 people in their life that they're talking to throughout the week, and you probably have hundreds of thousands. So where do you start to guide people to see a professional, or let them know that, you have your limited experiences, but at the end of the day, you're a singer-songwriter?
Yeah.
Like, what are your guidelines to be there for them, but also know that you're not the only person, that this isn't where it ends. This is just actually the beginning of you healing.
Yeah. I made a little documentary series that sort of, in my way, was that way of being like, here, watch this, and hopefully this will help you, so that it can reach as many people without me having to directly talk to one person about it, because it's wild how many people feel similar, same things. I also will just make posts that are open. It's almost like an open forum, just like on Instagram, and I'll make a post about therapy or about, going on medication or gaining 35 pounds. And I think people can relate to that. And I've had a lot of people say, I was brave enough to tell my parents that I have anxiety or depression, and I'm getting a therapist. And, they're scared, but I talk them through it. And so, yeah, I try to, make a posts that are for everybody, just kind of going through that. And I always try to encourage therapy and getting help, because, yes, at the end of the day, I am a musician, and I only have so much knowledge of, I know what I've been through, and from talking to people, I know what people have been through, but there's so much more that a trained, real therapist can do. So I always encourage therapy and getting help, and even if the first step is opening up to your parents and talking about that, I think the best thing you can do is open up and not hold it in. You hear so many stories where once it's too late, the parents are like, I had no idea. So a lot of times I think that's opening up is kind of the best thing that you can possibly do, and finding those safe spaces and safe people that you feel you can talk to. But I imagine it's really difficult when you're a teenager, and probably the most difficult. And that's why it's amazing what Jed is doing, and incorporating that with the youth culture. When I think about me as a teenager, my brain was very different than it is now. I feel much more self-aware now and much more open.
Well, I think as you get older, people stop. I think when you're younger, you think someone's going to discover there's something wrong with me, and I'm too much trouble, and I'm going to lose the few friends that I've even had the courage to make and be open with to begin with.
Yeah.
And then I think as you get older, you go, well, they were never friends to begin with if this is the reason they dropped me.
Exactly.
If somehow me exposing that I have hard days, or I have difficulties, or I take medication, or I have panic attacks, or there's days I can't get out of the bed, if that's the reason they don't want to be my friend, they weren't my friend to begin with.
Exactly.
And is that really a valuable person? But in the beginning, it feels like, especially I remember being...
That's hard to understand when you're a kid.
Absolutely. I think every friend I made, I was like, I tricked them. I was just like, they don't know how annoying I am. I just think everything that my siblings or my parents told me that sucked about me, I was just like, I've tricked this person. We're at a sleepover. Just don't let them know who we are.
About my best behavior.
And then I think as you just get older, you start to be like, I have value. There's definitely days that I'm not the best version of myself.
Yeah.
I've definitely overreacted. I've yelled at friends and been like, I would never want to be treated that way. I can't believe I did that. But then you also go, that's what an apology is for.
Yeah.
That's what changing is. That's what we all strive to, is that we're allowed to make mistakes, but people don't throw you away just because you made one mistake.
Yeah.
What would you say to your teenage self to encourage them to open up to a friend? Like, how would you say today Elohim would self-soothe, 16-year-old Elohim?
Yeah. We're so different when we're teenagers. We're so different. Sometimes I think about it and I just want to hold that girl and just tell her everything's going to be okay. I actually did something recently where I wrote a letter to myself a few years ago. It was a really cathartic, beautiful experience. I was writing it on a plane and I was getting really teary. I shared it actually online, but I think it's important to do that and sort of check in with yourself and write that letter too. I think it's a really good thing to do. You start to realize how far you've come. The only thing I can think of is, when I have children, how you'll help them. I don't know. It's like teenagers. They think they know everything. I thought I knew everything, and it's kind of hard to get through that. But it's like, it's all good. None of this matters. It's all going to be okay. And being honest and open is so important. It's tough. It's hard to realize that. It's tough.
Your album Brain Dead came out May of 2019, this year?
Yes.
Yeah. So for that full month, you gave all the proceeds to mental health organizations. What inspired you to do that? And what did you kind of learn from that experience?
So what inspired me was I feel like I always wanted to do more and almost like walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And I was introduced to Jed from a friend of mine, and she was like, I think that you would really vibe and connect with this organization. So I had heard about Jed, and I was putting out this specific album in the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month, and I wanted it to be fully dedicated to that. I've pretty much dedicated my career to helping others, and I always want to do more. So this was sort of that way to do more, and I'm so grateful for these organizations that are helping so many people doing things that I can't do because, I'm touring or whatever. So the least I can do is support these organizations, and whether that's money or my time. So yeah, I'm always just inspired to help people, and I always just want to do more. I'm always like, what else can I do? So we sat down and, planned this, and it was like, okay, for this month, I'll give all of the proceeds to Jed.
And do you have like links up on your website? Do you how do you show people? Because I think in the beginning somebody starts to become aware that this is something they're struggling with, or maybe somebody in their life is struggling with, and then they start to hear your songs, and then next thing you know they see like a little emblem that says like the Jed Foundation. Or are you telling them to read more information? Are you telling them to call people? Like, how do you want to utilize these organizations and guide them to them? Like, what is it that you want them to see and utilize them for?
Yeah, so on the group therapy tour, I really want to introduce, because I wasn't even aware that there were organizations that dealt with this, and I actually was lucky enough to be in New York when Jed was having their gala, and over the summer I was on the road, and I happened to be there the exact night. And it was so inspiring and so beautiful to be in a room full of people that had experienced things or gone through similar things, or knew somebody that went through this, and a whole organization dedicated to helping this. It was the most beautiful thing ever. I was so moved by it. So seeing that, I didn't know that even existed. And so seeing that, I really wanted to try to get, my fans and my friends and my family involved as well. So on this next tour that I'm doing, the group therapy tour, we're still working it out, but, have some way of having Jed present at the shows, and whether it's even just like pamphlets or whatever, and sort of introducing that to my community, because I think that they also would love to help any way that they can, because people are always asking how they can do more and help. So it's
giving resources, just letting them know that this is an organization, the foundation's already there.
Yeah.
How do you want to participate? I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and there's a community there, and it's just another way to feel less alone and to know that it's okay. So yeah, I'm excited to actually introduce this to my community.
And was it on your Brain Dead album is when you had their songs Panic Attack and Xanax?
No, Xanax was the second song I ever put out, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was when I still felt very much alone.
Yeah.
It was my second song. I had nothing going on. There was a little bit of buzz, but that song was when I started to feel the impact and started getting messages from other people saying, I never knew anybody else felt this way. I've never heard these words in a song before, and it's exactly what I go through. So,
or even that you could sing about it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that are, it's like, if it's not a love song, if it's
totally.
So I think you also start to. It's one thing to talk about it with your therapist or talk about it with your best friend. It's a whole other thing that you're like, I'm gonna write something to a beat.
Yeah. and put it out to the world. Anybody could hear this. And I put out Xanax in 2015. Okay. And I feel like even since then, the conversation of mental health has grown so much in such an amazing way. That song will always be so near and dear to my heart, because that was the first song I ever wrote that was fully about my experience. And I think what's interesting is, so that was 2015. When I wrote that song, I hadn't identified yet that I suffer from severe panic and anxiety. And it's almost like through the listener, and then, starting therapy, of course, but through the listeners and talking to them and sort of having this conversation where it's like, oh, this is not some weird thing that only I go through. Other people experience this as well. There's a name for it. It's something, and it's okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be okay. It's okay. One of my favorite things when when I'm at my worst, and I'm, going through sort of an episode, I tell this story a lot, but I was on a tour bus and one of my best friends was sitting with me, and I was dry heaving into a bag, and he was holding my hand, and he was like, "It's okay. It's fine. It's totally normal. You're fine. It's fine. You're okay. It's okay."
If people can do it drunk after a long night
Exactly.
of party,
No
you
one
can
even
do it.
looks twice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody makes fun of anybody at 2
I
a.m. on a
know.
Saturday, so why can't I do it on a bus?
But yeah, and that was actually the fastest I ever got through a panic attack. I think it was like 20 minutes. I was like, all right, I'm okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that message. I didn't
Yeah.
know I could receive it.
But if you were just like, it's okay.
I think when I started to verbally identify it out loud,
Yeah.
like I would tell a friend, I remember this one so clearly because it was one of the few that came out of nowhere. Sometimes they're triggered, but sometimes it was like out of nowhere.
Yes.
We saw a movie. Nothing about the movie scared me or upset me. I went in the bathroom and I immediately thought someone was going to kill me. Just in an empty bath. I couldn't even pee. Like I was like, I
have had that happen to me so many times, by the way.
Yeah, and I usually, again, it's triggered by something like I travel alone on the road where I'll be at a rest stop at 2 a.m. and that's where I think murder happens, and that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I was at a movie theater, and I go into the bathroom. I assume, like, all of a sudden I have this full panic attack. I think I'm going to die. I start to have, like, heart palpitations. I start to cry, and I couldn't pee. I was, like, too scared. So I stood in the middle of the stairs, because it was like almost like in a basement. So in the middle of the stairs, just crying, waiting for my friend to get out of the bathroom. And he's like, "I saw you 2 seconds ago. Like, I don't understand what's happening." And I had to go, "I'm having a panic attack. I just need you to sit with me." So we left the movie theater. We sat outside on a bench, and he's not he's a fun friend. He's not a
serious. Yeah.
I've never told him my feelings. He's
Right.
not that, like, most of the time I tell him my feelings, he's like, "Do you want a beer?" Like, he doesn't know how to handle it. But I just didn't have any other option other to say, "I'm having a panic attack. I just need you to sit with me." And I sat there. He grabbed my hand, which was almost like shocking because he's not that kind of friend. And he didn't say anything. He just held my hand. And the fact that I said it out loud and he let me, like, go through the process and he didn't, like, bother me or make fun of me, like all these things
Or
that I thought
stress you out more, yeah.
and it was the same thing. Like, it took maybe about 15, 20 minutes. I was still, like, kind of shaken up afterwards. And he was like, "Do I put you in a cab?" I was like, "I think I'm fine. Thanks." And it was, like, one of the things where, like, it changed our friendship.
Yeah.
Where, like...
Oh, my gosh, yeah. And same with this friend. It was, like, from that moment on, and there was just this understanding, I think, too. And that the understanding and the awareness is sort of what brings comfort to people that struggle. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about opening up and having friends that you can open up to. Imagine if that guy had been like, "You're so weird, I'm leaving," or something, would have sent you more. But the fact that he sat there and just held your hand, and that's an amazing, beautiful friend.
And it created a trust I don't think I would have, if I had not experienced that in front of him, I don't think I would have brought our friendship to that level.
Yeah.
Like, he saw me at a place where I felt my most vulnerable and most probably embarrassed, even though I couldn't control it.
It is embarrassing. And I have a sort of a fear of hanging out with new people alone because I have my little things. Like, for whatever reason, restaurants trigger me. And so when I'm with the people that I love, that I know and I trust, I always get the bill before I eat and pay so that I'm not trapped there and I can leave if I need to. Because restaurants have, for whatever reason, since I was a little kid, have been a trigger for me. And it's interesting because, I have this fear of hanging out with new people I don't know and don't know this side of me because, oh my gosh, what if I go and what if I'm sitting at this dinner meeting and I start having a panic attack?
Yeah.
Which has happened to me, and it's really scary. And then you start to go into that dissociation thing, and you're in public, and you're alone, and you don't, So it's beautiful to have friendships like that, and to sometimes it's like all you can do in that moment when you're sort of freaking out and panicking. Sort of almost the only thing you do is like, I have to say this, like, I'm having a panic attack,
It feels like calling the situation. Like,
exactly.
And it's helped me even say in stuff that has nothing to do with mental illness, just being like, "I'm uncomfortable. Something you've done has made me uncomfortable."
Yeah.
And I've had guys, I've had women be like, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that." But it is almost a little bit like an audible, like, I'm calling the situation.
Yes.
You touched my leg. I don't think you did anything on
Yeah.
purpose, but it's making me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they go, oh. And it creates this kind of self-awareness, a self-awareness that I'm upset right now, and a self-awareness where you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was something that would upset anybody, let alone you, and that's not what I meant to do. And I think that it's been a weirdly important tool for me to like, all right, I'm just going to say what's going on, and we're just going to hope everybody understands. And I'm going to do the best I can not to make it a bigger deal, but also understand that it is a deal of some sort, and I need X, Y, and Z from you at this moment.
Well, and I think it's important to identify what friendships are sort of worth having, you know? You want those people that make you feel comfortable and understood and hear you and will sit with you and hold your hand in silence because you're, you know, throwing up in a bag or shaking uncontrollably from panic. So I think, and that's a part of growing and growing up is you realize who are those real people in your life that understand you and
how to make
you.
how to make new friends. Going back to like how do you talk to people when you're a teenager and open up as a teenager? I think how you make your friends when you're younger seems to be just like mutual interests.
Yes.
But then how to open up to them feels so foreign because the reason you're friends is you both like snowboarding or you both like this one artist. How do you branch it into something deeper? And sometimes it happens organically. Sometimes it is like you sit down and you express yourself. But I think as I've learned to open up and connect with the friends that I've had, it's made it easier to identify new people and be like, that's a future bestie right there. Like that's somebody that I can open up to. The same way that if you're hiring somebody, well, why would you hire this person and not that person? Well, you know, they said this and it doesn't really come from an empathetic place. And I'm not saying they're not a bad person. I'm just saying that's not somebody I want around me 24/7. And I think that's a skill that comes out of understanding yourself, but also being open enough to express the vulnerable sides of yourself.
It's interesting, actually, about the whole teenager thing. When I started Lexbro, I was sort of reaching out to anybody that I could that would maybe understand, and I had reconnected with a girl who was like one of my best friends in middle school and the beginning of high school, and she's now a therapist, and she was like, oh, I was on Lexbro for 10 years, and all through high school. I had no idea, and it's just, I think that's why it's really cool that people are opening up now because, you know, I could have been there for her or learned so much. I had no idea.
You might have gone on it earlier. You might have saved years of the pain that you went through by knowing that it wasn't a big deal and that tons of people in your life had experimented with it or tried it or are currently on it.
And that's been my goal with talking so openly but so honestly openly from a very genuine place. And that genuine place a lot of times is not a pretty place. It's not glamorous at all. Even though we can, you know, go on social media and look super cool and be traveling the world. But, yeah, it's not the highlight reel. So I've tried to just be myself and be really honest with that because it genuinely has helped, you know, people go to therapy or tell their parents or go on medication. I've had people start medication, and not that I'm like everyone should go on medication, but if it's going to help you, I'm here, and I'm here to help you not feel so afraid.
That's awesome. I appreciate your time and
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wanna go where love is alive.